Under Joe Biden's presidency, there was cautious optimism that the US might return to the 2015 nuclear deal known as the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Diplomats on both sides tiptoed back into negotiations, hoping to salvage what remained of the agreement after Donald Trump's 2018 withdrawal. Talks were revived in Vienna in 2021. Iran wanted guarantees. The US wanted limits on Iran's enrichment. Back and forth, the negotiations dragged on. Every step forward was matched by 2 steps back. US sanctions remained, Iran's uranium levels crept higher, and trust remained elusive. Meanwhile, Iran deepened its ties with Russia and China. Squeezed by Western sanctions, it pivoted east, signing a sweeping 25-year cooperation deal with Beijing in March 2021 and sending drones to Moscow amid its war against Ukraine. These moves signaled a strategic realignment. Tehran was no longer waiting for Washington to change its mind. In the region, Iran's influence continued to grow. It strengthened its support of proxy groups across Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, an unofficial union it calls the Axis of Resistance. The United States, in turn, doubled down on partnerships with Gulf allies, expanded intelligence sharing with Israel, and stepped up naval patrols in the Strait of Hormuz. On October 2023, the region was jolted when Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel. Tel Aviv launched a relentless bombardment on Palestine's Gaza, reducing entire neighborhoods to rubble and killing tens of thousands of Palestinians within just the first few months. While Iran is known to support Hamas, Tehran denied direct involvement in the group's October 7 attack. The US, still under Joe Biden's leadership, deployed warships to the eastern Mediterranean and rushed military aid to Israel, vowing to deter Iran from joining the war directly. But Iran played a calibrated game. It allowed its proxies to act, but avoided direct confrontation. That changed in April 2024, when an Israeli airstrike killed senior Iranian commanders in Iran's consulate in Damascus. For the first time in the tense history between Tel Aviv and Tehran, Iran launched a direct drone and missile assault on Israel from Iranian soil. Though most of these strikes were intercepted, Tehran sent a message that it was no longer hiding behind proxies, and, if attacked, it would strike back, on its own terms, from its own land. The region held its breath. Was this the start of a full-blown war between 2 of the Middle East's most powerful adversaries? For a while, the answer seemed to be no. The attack had been calibrated, symbolic and powerful, but limited in scope. Iran had made a point. Israel absorbed the strike, reassured by its allies. The United States, while backing Israel, stopped short of encouraging escalation, but the fuse had been lit. In May 2024, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi and Foreign Minister Amir Abdullahian were killed in a mysterious helicopter crash in the country's northwest. The government called it an accident. The crash came amid a backdrop of deepening national unrest, growing economic hardship, and widespread protests calling for political reform. From July 2024 onwards, Tel Aviv started becoming increasingly aggressive and provocative, conducting a number of targeted assassinations. Hamas political bureau chief Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated by Israel in Iran's capital, Tehran. A few months later, in September 2024, Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was killed in an Israeli strike in southern Lebanon. Each incident stoked the fire, but none crossed the threshold and pushed the countries into all-out war. Then came a political earthquake in Washington. In January 2025, Donald Trump won back the US presidency, bringing a confrontational tone and zero appetite for diplomacy to the White House. Hopes of renewed negotiations faded fast. Trump once again dismissed the JCPOA and vowed to prevent Iran from ever acquiring a nuclear weapon. Still, back-channel efforts emerged. Oman, a neutral mediator, began laying the groundwork for talks. But Trump made his stance clear.
Iran will never have a nuclear weapon.
I want Iran to be a wonderful, great, happy country. But they can't have a nuclear weapon.
They can't have a nuclear weapon, that's the only thing.
Just days before a 6th round of talks was set to begin in Muscat, the conflict escalated. On June 12, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a massive aerial offensive campaign targeting Iranian military and nuclear infrastructure deep inside Iranian territory. Missiles struck facilities in Natanz, Isfahan, and East Azerbaijan. Dozens were killed, including IRGC officers and nuclear scientists. Tehran called the attacks an act of war. and the Iranian people protested in the streets, calling on their government to retaliate. The response was immediate.
که رژیم صهیونیستی اشتباه بزرگی کرد. عواقب او رو بیچاره خواهد کرد. زندگی برای اونها تلخ خواهد شد بدون تردید.
On June 13, Iran launched a wave of attacks, this time far larger. Over 150 ballistic missiles and more than 100 drones were fired at Israeli military and industrial sites. Most of them were intercepted, but several got through, damaging infrastructure and injuring dozens. In Tel Aviv and Haifa, air raid sirens wailed as fires lit the sky. And the cycle continued. Israel struck back, hitting Iranian oil refineries, air bases, and even state TV headquarters in Tehran. Civilian casualties mounted.
We're in the midst of one of the greatest military operations in history. The regime doesn't know what hit them. They don't know what will hit them.
At first, the United States walked the line. It deployed missile defense systems and warships to the Gulf. Its jets helped intercept Iranian missiles. But Tehran made it clear, if the US participated in attacks on its nuclear sites, it would be an all-out war. And then, US President Trump started making ambiguous statements.
Will you strike the Iranian nuclear component? I may do it, I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
I have a message directly from the President, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks."
Then, on June 22, everything shifted. The US attacked Iran's nuclear infrastructure, targeting Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. It was the kind of attack long threatened, often debated, but never carried out, until now. Pentagon officials described the strikes as a calculated deterrent, not aimed at toppling the government, but rather at setting back Iran's nuclear ambitions.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Tehran denounced the attack as a grave breach of international law, declared it would defend its sovereignty and put its military on high alert. On June 23, Iran responded, firing missiles at Al Udeid airbase in Qatar, where thousands of US troops are stationed. But this was no surprise strike. Tehran had issued a warning through Qatari intermediaries, and airspace was cleared in advance. All missiles were intercepted, no casualties were reported, and the attack was widely seen as a calculated message, not an escalation. Just hours later, US President Donald Trump announced a phased ceasefire between Iran and Israel, facilitated by Qatar's mediation. He described it as a complete and total ceasefire. Both sides agreed to halt attacks, but the region remains on edge. With Washington now fully inside the fight and diplomacy pushed to the brink, one question remains. Is this the next chapter in a decades-long rivalry?